to talk about view objects. View objects is a part of one interpretation of the DDD architecture. So you already know what DDD is, domain-driven design. Before, one of you, Elena, was asking me, what is DDD? And I realized that I wasn't at all prepared for this. Maybe I can explain it this way. DDD is a philosophy, it's a way of thinking about your code, which puts the domain, the business logic, whatever it provides value to your company, that's how they define it, puts it in the center. It tells the developer, you're gonna code, but whatever you do, this domain part, it's your focus, that's your center. Everything else, we're gonna leave it aside. And before I get to that, I'm gonna tell you a bit about myself so you know where I'm coming from. I come from Dominican Republic, but that's not the part I wanted to get to. The reason I learned architecture as a front-end developer, that's what I want to get to. I'm actually a lawyer. I studied law in Dominican Republic. I came to Europe for a master's degree. I ended up in Estonia for some reason, was working there, and I started coding there. So I had a good reason to have a lot of, what is this, imposter syndrome, right? So I didn't feel like I was what I was supposed to be, let's say. I felt really good doing what I was doing, but I didn't have any reason to think that I'm the one that's supposed to be there working for these big companies, writing code, mixing everything up. And so I told myself, I'm gonna write some application for myself. It was supposed to be like some recipe application. It was supposed an application in which I could just add my recipes, like see the list of ingredients, maybe have a pantry where I have like the things that I have at home, and I can ask the application, what can I cook given the things that I have at home? Tell it I'm gonna cook this, remove it from the pantry, like make a shopping list, or I can make these recipes. This the thing that I wanted to do. So I said, if I am able to do this, that would be enough proof for myself that I know what I'm doing as a front-end developer. So I used a Firebase backend, just the backend was just supposed to be a data storage, and I was gonna write everything and using what I know, which back then was mostly view development and the front end. So I started working on the application. In the beginning, everything was great. I added recipes, it was working. I could see the list of recipes, everything was working. But then I started working on the shopping list and the pantry application, and things started getting heavier and heavier. Became harder and harder to work on the application. After some point, a code base that I was the only one working with, I didn't feel happy working with it. After a while, I just didn't understand what I was doing. So that's when I noticed there's something missing. I need to learn architecture. That was the thing that was keeping me from feeling like I knew what I was doing. So I was living in Lyon when this happened, and I started looking for places where I could learn this architecture. And I ended up in a meetup, kind of like this one, but they were focused on DDD. I had no idea what DDD was or how it could help me. But I knew it had something to do with software architecture, so I went. A bunch of Java developers talking about things that I didn't understand, but it seemed very interesting to me, because it's like these people know what I need to know. I just gotta come here and start learning it. Eventually, I got really lucky because I got called for an interview in a place, and when I entered the company, I saw some of the people that I had met in the meetups. They were working in this company. So I said, oh, awesome. Apparently, this company is implementing the things that they're talking about in the meetup about DDD. I got hired, and effectively, that was the place to learn front-end DDD in Lyon, because this startup, which hired this company that was making these meetups, it's a consultant company in Lyon, quite big, called Ipon, and they are very big on clean code and architecture and DDD. And they implemented wherever they go. So that was my first time working with DDD. And it opened my eyes in a way that I want to convey to you at least a little bit. So that's what got me here, okay? So DDD. I think the best way to explain DDD is this picture. I found it in this blog post here. And the only question I need to ask you is, if you're working, these are two software projects, and you had to replace the scissors, in which one would you like to work in? Okay, so that's the thing that we want to get to. This is the problem we want to solve. Okay, easy enough. Why would a company care about coding architecture? Actually, let's just briefly, which one of you have ever done any clean architecture practices like that is being pushed by the company? Like, oh, this company is implementing these practices. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think open source.
Huh?
Open source.
Open source implements DDD? Or
Implement these.
no. The reason I ask is because when I joined this company in Lyon, where I learned everything about Frontend DDD, most of the things I learned in them, learned it there. That was the first company I was working with that actually wrote tests for the frontend. The first company, and I already had like 6 years of experience when I got there. They had 100% coverage policy in that company. They were no jokes about it. But that was my first time. So I think these ideas that I'm going to show you are not very widespread. I have had a lot of companies that during the interviews they say that they're interested in that. They say, yeah, this is what we want to do. That sounds amazing. And I get there, and I see that there is nothing being implemented. So I start implementing it myself, and I get pushback from the company. We have deadlines. We don't have time for that. Why are you taking so long? There is no investment in any type of change. The company is not interested. Okay. And I want to tell you that is not necessarily a bad thing. Why would a company care about clean code and architecture? Maintainability, reusability, testability? Not really. That's developers care about that. The company doesn't. What the company cares is actually about managing costs. And the second thing is leveraging the knowledge of developers to enrich their domain. It's the second thing I'm going to talk about really soon. There are a couple of ways you can work as a frontend. Depending on where and how you're working, your company, your structure around you may or may not have the incentives to implement this type of ideas. That's what I've noticed. And that is a good thing. Actually, if you read Scott Billett's book about patterns and principles of domain-driven design, the first thing they tell you is, depending on what you're doing, you may not need this at all. You are, depending on the project you're making, a big ball of mud is okay, because that's all you need for that. So I guess it's important to understand in which contexts these things become handy, become valuable for the company. The reason I was approached by the company I'm working now is because they wanted to make sure that the code that they are writing now is going to be workable, not maintainable, in 20 years' time. The company that I'm working now, the first project they gave me was jQuery from like probably early 2000s, and that code is still being used today. So they are sure that the code that I'm writing now is going to be used in 20 years. Like that's how they're planning. If you're working in a company that's not planning that far ahead, that's one less reason for you to really go crazy about these things. My company does, so they really care. And the second thing my company really values is domain knowledge. My company really loves filing patents, and they are really secretive about their knowledge, because they like to be in the avant-garde, creating a lot of new things, and they value that. So they want their developers to also be thinking about unique solutions to the problems they're dealing with. So if you're working in an agency and you get a bunch of similar problems from different clients, you have very little incentive to think about this. What is the domain knowledge that you're trying to protect? Not really. It's just the same for every company. And as an agency, Why would you try to protect domain knowledge if you have a bunch of clients? It's the client that's supposed to care about that, not you as an agency. Depending on the agency, maybe there are agencies like Ippon that really put that at the core of their philosophy, but I just don't see the incentive structure everywhere. So these are problems that I'm going to give you solutions for problems that don't really apply for every type of developer, and definitely not every type of front-end developer. If you're a front-end developer that is mostly writing brochure sites, you don't need this. There is no domain knowledge to protect, unless maybe like animation stuff that you want to protect for your, like that's another thing. You know? That's not what I'm going to talk about. That's the mandatory architecture flowchart. So what I learned is hexagonal DDD. Hexagonal, the shape, is one implementation of DDD. And DDD at its core is just the plain old solid development principles that you know and love from Uncle Bob. It's implementing these ideas with the objective of protecting your domain. That's basically what DDD is at its core. And for people that are already, especially backend developers that already know what DDD is, some of them, they hear the word DDD and they have like it's a word that comes with baggage. They already have prejudice against it. They already have like, that synonym of you're giving me more work for actually nothing in return. And I get where that comes from. I get where that critique comes from. What I invite you to do, especially as a front-end developer, is to learn these ideas, especially the clean code ideas and the ideas that some of the ideas that I'm gonna share with you here. Just take the ideas, understand the rules and why they exist, and just decide for yourself if they make sense for you. Just decide for yourself if they make sense for you. First thing to note is that not deciding an architecture on your project is an architectural decision. That's already a decision. Not choosing any architecture is an architecture, okay? So it's not like you're gonna escape this reasoning. Another point that I wanted to point out is that when I wrote this code that I ended up not liking, I was actually following what I learned, like via tutorials. Like it was in that case it was Vue, but it's just the same that I saw like in React tutorials or Angular. It was not a problem with how I wrote the Vue code. Like the thing that I needed to learn went a bit deeper. So let me explain a bit about this specific implementation of domain-driven design. This is the domain. It's like the yellow post-it in the picture I showed you, and it connects with a couple more things. Domain is your center, and you have your objects. You can consider them, and this is all front-end, by the way. Imagine this is front-end code. This is for back-end developers. This is pretty obvious, probably, but imagine that you are working in a front-end application, and you have models. You have, like in my case, you have the recipe model, maybe ingredient models. You have whatever the pantry models. You have a scheduler, whatever. These are all models in the front end, and those are objects, instances of classes in JavaScript or TypeScript. Actually, TypeScript, and there is a secondary layer, which is just think about the domain, about what your application needs. In my case, that's why I was calling them models. It's whatever your application needs to work. That's your domain. Secondary is where the thing that your application needs, where is it coming from? That's secondary. It can come from backend REST API, local storage, even the Vuex or the store. Because I imagine not all of you write Vue. It can be Redux store, Xstate, Piña, whatever you get, whatever store you have. It's part of your secondary. That's just a place where your data is coming from. They give you this thing that has this name. They are in this resource that have this name. We're not gonna get to this today. It ends up as a domain instance, and that's where the magic happens. That's where you want to keep most of your domain logic, and eventually, your application has what it needs, but you have a UI layer somewhere that you want to show nice little views and cars and dialogues. At this level, the view objects, the thing that I'm going to talk about, is what your application displays. So what your application needs, where is it coming from, and what it displays, two different things. It can need one thing and it displays something different. So the view object is just what the application is showing. Very simple. There are a bunch of rules related to all of these things. And the people that don't like DDD, that's usually where they start complaining about these rules. I'm not going to go too deep into these rules now. But I still encourage you to go ahead and learn them and take what makes sense for you and just discard what you don't. In my experience, even the slightest inclusion of these ideas into your code base can make it drastically better. That's why today I'm just talking about one thing. I'm just talking about view objects. Okay. Let's go to the code. The code is right there in this GitHub page. And that's what I'm going to show you here. Code is already running. We can probably close this. And let me show you what is running actually. You have this little application here. This classic and composition just means that I'm using classic view components, which should look like this. Some people may have an idea of what this is doing. Maybe it looks a bit like Angular.
Looks like JavaScript.
Yeah, and this is what it's doing. You have this thing. You can search, and you can select some stuff. And the composition and the recipes is the same thing, just implemented differently. This classic is this thing, and composition is the exact same thing, but instead of using this what in Vue they call this options object, is using these composition functions, which look a lot like React hooks. So that's what I'm going to be showing you now, because I assume most of you write React, right? So you're going to probably be more familiar with this syntax. You can close classic. Is it too small? Want me to zoom in?
Yeah.
There's better? So very simple. You have a thing. The way that Vue does this two-way data binding is by using this vModel primitive, to which you pass whatever JavaScript variable, and this variable here is going to be bound to the value of the HTML input. So when you change it here, it also changes in your code, basically. That's the only magic that is happening here. If you go here to the definition of this term, you can see that term. This would be kind of like use state in React, and it's basically saying here, whenever this thing changes, you run this filter. Does this code look familiar? Has any one of you done something similar to this, like an application that has this filter, that the logic is in the component like that?
Yes.
Right. Very, 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 very much so. Let's add a bit more complexity to this code base. I want to have this clear and multi-select functionality here. I have this children element card. that when you click on the card, you have this class that gets toggled. Wow, already. And you have information about these icons that is being shown here, depending on the amount of the servings. It's just a bunch of logic in the component for the recipe card and for the recipe page. If I go here in composition now, you can see that I can select one thing and deselect it. And if I click multi-select, I can select a bunch of things. And if I on-click multi-select, the last one that is selected stays selected. So that's a bunch of logic that is there. So this is how that looks in a regular application for all that functionality. Now this is that same thing written using view objects. See the difference? The main difference here is that what this code is doing here is the only logic you see here is the one related to the thing that is happening in the HTML. And that's exactly what Vue and front-end frameworks like it are built to do. So my job here is to make sure that I use the framework only for the thing that it's meant to do. As a matter of fact, one of the things they told me when they hired me is like, assume at every step of the way that we're going to change your backend API at some point. You're going to change the front-end framework at some point. And of course, the domain is going to evolve. You should be able to change your domain without changing the UI layer, Vue React. You should be able to change the secondary without changing your UI layer. And at the most you can, you should be able to change your secondary, your APIs, without changing the domain. Go back to the image that I showed you in the beginning. That's what I want. So where is this logic living now? If it's not here, and as you can see, this is the implementation. It works just as the other ones, right? So what's the only difference? The only difference is this view object here. As you can see, it's just a class, but it's instantiated from a domain. As I said before, it comes from a domain. But the functionality related to that thing, the fact that it's toggled, and even the icon that is presenting is defined in this view object. So wherever I use this recipe view, it's going to come with the information that it needs to display itself. That's why it's a view. I told you that in the view part is just what the application displays. That is also extracted away. This is not domain yet, not at all. And but then you can ask me, but okay, you have one view object for each of these cards, but how do you manage then functionality that refers to all of them, that is independent of the individual view? For example, this functionality about clearing them and multi-selecting them and keeping the last one selected, it's particular to all the recipes, not a single recipe object. That's where collections come in. A collection is just a class that receives all the views as an array, and you add to this collection whatever functionality that is related to that collection, the filter, the clearing, the multi-select functionality, everything is here. And the thing I like the most about this is that here, when you run the click for toggling the thing, all you have to do is run this method on click right here, and that's the functionality. So this is the recipe card component that does everything that happens on the click, and everything is happening via either the collection or the view object. The fact that the collection is multi-selectable or not also is part of the collection object. Also the clear and the disabled status, all coming from the collection object. And this is beautiful. The term, a value, you don't actually even need that. The filter is also running through the collection. So I could actually remove that, and that would still work. You see? I was too lazy to recreate the recipes page. That's it. That's what I wanted to show you. I just want to show you that this is how your components can look like. Actually, this is how your components can look like. What did this not there is? Well, that's it. And here are a couple of articles that I wrote about the topic, where I go a bit more in depth about the other elements of the architecture. And this is my go-to source of everything related to DDD. It's a really, really good book. It's not the original one. It's just a better explanation, at least for me. If you have any questions,